Hello again and welcome to part two of my conversation with Katie Wokasch of Name.com. But first, the inevitable plug for my media training service. Do you want to sound as confident as my interviewee in this episode? If you talk to the press or other media, are you worried you'll be misquoted, or they'll just publish their story and not yours? Clapperton Media Associates can help with coaching. Drop me a note, guy@clapperton.co.uk, and we'll arrange a time for an exploratory call. Now, back to the podcast. And for those who missed part one, it's still online, but if you just want to crack on, that's fine. Here's a quick reminder of why you should be listening. Katie is at her most engaged when able to think end-to-end about how a product is built and used. She cares about clarity, maintainability, and making systems understandable for both users and the people who work on them. That, of course, is straight out of her LinkedIn profile, just as I did last time. Former geologist, she's currently product engineering lead at Name.com, and her name is Katie Wokasch. Katie, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Okay, it's easy to vibe code a landing page, says a man who's never vibe coded a landing page in his life. I'm informed it's easy to vibe code a landing page, but it's harder to vibe code a secure database. Where does a vibe usually break down, and when does engineering need to take over?
I think in my experience, and again, you check me in 6 months and this answer will probably be out of date given the pace that the AI models are evolving. But at least as it stands now, really when you move from prototype to actual product build is, to me, where engineering talent needs to be heavily involved. And the reason I say that is that vibe coding is fantastic for prototyping, for testing market fit, to testing maybe different user interfaces or different colors on buttons, however granular you want to get. It's a fantastic way to do that with low developer resources or no developer resources. And so the time to learning has collapsed. And I think that's incredibly valuable to building the right products and the best products. I do think that when you get to a point where you're dealing with data or payments, authentication, security, performance, or scaling, that's really when engineering judgment needs to come into play. Because it's, as you mentioned previously in the last episode, it's going to give you often the answer that it thinks you want to hear. It's going to guess at what the answer is. And in those cases, you really want a solution that has been determined to be the best solution, the most secure solution, because the consequences of not building out security properly or not building out databases in a proper way is that your app might not scale. You might expose customer data, all sorts of scary legal and technical ramifications for not bringing in engineering expertise at that time. So I think the prototype, the vibe coding really does shorten the front of the process and make that much more agile and much more iterative. But we still need engineers at that point at which you say, I need to get this in front of a bunch of users and make sure that it's safe and secure. That's really when engineers need to be brought in.
That's fine now because the engineers are there, although I do get the skills shortage issue coming up in front of me time and time again. But if an entrepreneur vibe codes their entire first year, and if an incoming generation sticks to vibe coding and it really takes off, are they building a house of cards that will eventually require a total rewrite? By which I mean, where's the next generation's basic skills going to come from?
Yeah, this is interesting. If you had asked me a year ago, I probably would have had a different opinion. But I think having now incorporated AI into all of my workflows as an engineer, I think the way in which you use AI is quite different as an engineer than as a non-engineer. And so I think the value of bringing in engineering early, and this is part of why I am passionate about product engineering, is that bringing in an engineer early is they know the questions to ask. They understand where the potential issues will be with scalability or performance or security. And so getting those questions answered by someone with engineering expertise will help you build a better product from the start. So I think, in my experience with these vibe coding apps, they tend to use really well-defined programming languages under the hood. And so there are a lot of engineering best practices. There's a whole team at Lovable and Vercel and Replit of engineers building these products, right? So the vibe coded app that you're spinning up is based on engineering expertise at its core. But I do think that for vibe coding, a prototype or even an MVP, as you mentioned, really when you start to talk about scale and security is when you should be bringing in engineers. I say all of that and knowing that Claude Code, that team is basically writing all of their code using their Anthropic model. So I could be wrong and I could be wrong now and I could be wrong in 6 months, but I do think that having someone in the room or on the side being able to say, look at the code that's being written by the vibe coding platform and say, yes, these are scalable practices, or no, they aren't. Making that small investment earlier really will prevent this house of cards phenomenon that you were talking about. And it will, what's the expression? A stitch in time saves nine.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very
the one.
true. Very true in this case as well. Just a little bit of engineering input early, I think, will save a lot of headaches in the long run.
So let's say I'm a founder who doesn't code and I've vibed my first product into existence, or I'm in the process of vibing my first product into existence. Give me three technical red flags I should look for before I try to scale this.
Based on the previous answer, having someone who can actually explain how the app works is really important. So that'd be the first piece of advice I'd give. And what I mean by that is because AI is generating code really quickly, having an engineer to even just review it and look at the basic architecture, how the database tables are set up, how the pieces connect, having that insight and having someone who can explain how the application works, even at a high level, is really, really important. I think a second red flag is if security and permissions are added as an afterthought. I think this is easy to think of after the fact because you're just having so much fun building and sure it'll spin up a database for you and everything is very seamless and that's part of what is so powerful about these platforms. But I do think things like security, permissions, scalability are so important to think about early because of the consequences of not securing sensitive data. For example, we deal with this at name.com. Any hiding customer data is incredibly important, right? And protecting sensitive data. So these are pieces that you really need a human in the loop to think about, and they should be core to your application and not an afterthought. And I think the last red flag I would say is if everything you're fixing, if you add things on, it's making the product messier. That's also a red flag. In my experience, building with vibe coding apps or with AI models as I'm writing code, it often will attempt to fix the problem by just adding code on top of the existing code. This is getting better. I will say the more advanced models, I'm a huge fan of Opus, Anthropic's model. It does do a much better job at cleaning up after itself and trying to refine the underlying solution. But I would just say that in general, my experience is it's going to try and add band-aids or add an extra coat of paint or, it's going to try and add on to instead of potentially fixing the underlying problem itself. So I would just keep an eye on if it feels like things are getting messier or experiences are getting a little bit clunkier, that might be a sign that the AI is just adding technical debt on top and not solving the problem.
Of course, that's not unique to vibe coding.
Yes.
I've had websites where I've just in WordPress where I've just added this bit here and that little bit of code there and this add-on here, and before you know where you are, after a year, it's a complete mess when it actually looked quite
Yes,
good. So it's the same principle, just automated. I take that completely.
absolutely.
If anyone can use the same AI to build the same to build an app, how does a founder bake soul or unique value into a product so it doesn't feel like just another template based on that same piece of AI?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting trend we're seeing right now, all around brand and identity. I think brand is becoming absolutely critical, and feeling like a human is involved in a product is something that people really, really care about. And where that comes down to, I think it's having a really clear point of view and understanding that what exactly you want the experience of your application to be and making that unique and making that authentic. I've noticed with these vibe coding apps, there's kind of this standard color scheme and fonts. It'll just use sort of a predefined template. When you don't give it a lot of information, it's just going to guess and it's going to build a very standard looking website. And having experience building these, it has become apparent when a website is built with AI. And so having taking the time to use real design judgment, really go through your experience and take great care in making it feel like it something that you looked at all of the details and that a human was involved in making those decisions. But I do think that the brand is more than just how the website looks. And this is something we're really passionate about at name.com. Essentially, what we're noticing is because that building, that getting to MVP, that prototyping timeline has collapsed, the need to secure a brand and a domain name and identity early, that has moved basically to the front of the process. And I've experienced this firsthand where I've built, fun little side apps. I go to find a domain name. I've built an app with some trendy name, not the best at naming apps or brands, but you come up with some idea and the domain names are taken. And so I think then you have to find a new domain name, rebuild the application, et cetera, et cetera. So I think figuring out what you want your brand to be, both aesthetically and also logistically, from what you want the name to be and the domain name to be, all of those decisions should happen really early and should guide any development, whether that's AI or a human developing it. And that being really clear about what your brand and identity is, I think will help set you apart from these completely AI generated applications that are flooding the market.
That sounds more than reasonable. I suppose at name.com you'll have seen an awful lot of these, you might say, technologies go through the hype cycle, which I think AI definitely is at the moment, and I'm sure vibe coding will go through the same. Is there any sort of common thread between the businesses that survive in name.com's experience?
I think we're always striving for both at name.com and what I've been seeing in a lot of our customers and in what builders, entrepreneurs, small business owners are building is the key to success is being really close to your user and understanding what your user actually needs and what experiences will help them use your product better, whatever that product is, experience your application in a seamless, frictionless way. I'm a huge user of Vercel. They really have built out an incredible ecosystem and it's very developer friendly. And an example of how they have done this for their users is I'll write code on my machine, I'll push the code, it automatically rebuilds and redeploys my website. So I can see changes I've made on my machine live on my website without me having to do any other work other than just pushing my code, which for non-technical users, that might not mean much, but for engineers, that eliminates several steps, and it makes that it's just little nuances that I'm noticing these really successful companies are doing. They're anticipating user needs, and they are building that. That is what they are laser focused on. And so this is actually a great reason for using vibe coding is that rapid prototyping. It allows you to figure out what your users do need and what they do or don't like about your experience so that you are always staying very, very close to your end user and building the application for them where they are and not where you think they are.
This is sounding very much like automating or indeed supporting good old-fashioned solid business principles because
Yes.
there are no new business rules, but to make it much, much, much more rapid. But the customer still is, to use that dreadful cliche, the customer really still is king,
Yes.
regardless. Is that unfair?
Yes, I think that's fair. It's funny you make that note because We recently have been testing a few things on our website using vibe coding. We're experimenting on a few things, and the age old, this is not new insight. This is not new advice. We're just kind of rehearing it every so often. So we're building experiences that we had tested potentially 15 years ago. We're all just repeating the cycle, I think, over and over again with new tools.
Absolutely, but new and better tools, we hope. Kate, we're coming to
Yes.
the end of our time together. This has been an absolute delight, but where can people find out more about yourself and about name.com?
I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Katie, Katie Wokasch, Wokasch. Please follow me, message me. I'd love to hear from folks. Name.com is at www.name.com. And slash reseller is where you can find out more about our API specifically. But yeah, we're on LinkedIn, we're on socials. You can find us in a bunch of places, but I'm a great place to start if you have any questions.
Katie Wokasch, Product Engineering Lead at Name.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And if you'd like to hear more than this, please do subscribe to the Near Futurist podcast on any of the platforms available. And do come back not next week, but next year for the first installment of our next interview. That's right, 14 episodes a year, and 2 of those were only because I thought the interviewee was really interesting. And this is episode 14. Meanwhile, there's a huge back catalogue available online going back to late 2019, even though Apple seems to think I started it the year before. I promise I didn't, I was there. I should go back myself and have a giggle at some of the stuff I thought was imminent in those early days. Meanwhile, I'll be around, media training and coaching, and of course emceeing and speaking at events. If you want to find out more, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening. See you around sometime.